Welcome, and thank you for joining the Q&A session of the tutorial that has been done and just premiered. My name is Margaret Merkley, and I am one of your moderators today. I am chair of the program committee at OGR and also the president.
My name is Rob Cairns, and I will be the other moderator for today's handbell tutorial, and I am the vice president of OGR.
Today's tutorial was produced by Dominique Moreau. In addition to today's tutorial on meters, Dom has produced, I think, a great cross-section of tutorials that are now on the event page of the OGR website. These include playing with heavy bells, active listening, and how to use a metronome. He has one more in store for you on Saturday, March the 6th. Plan on watching this one to pick up some techniques and tricks on how to make your life easier when you're malleting.
A little background about Dom. He is a percussionist and a music teacher in Ottawa. Dom plays with the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra and teaches at Gisèle-Lalonde High School and the Ottawa Youth Orchestra. And he plays with St. Andrew's Ringers. At this point, we'll start with our questions through the chat.
Well, Dom, I have a question to start off with. Why is a compound meter not simply written as triplets?
That's a very good question. It could very well be written as triplets, but as you've probably seen, triplets usually have the little 3 numbers. Sometimes they have brackets. It clutters the page with ink. Also, triplets are usually supposed to be a sometimes thing. And if everything is written as triplets, it would just become confusing to have all of that ink on the page, but also the time signature, the meter wouldn't tell you exactly how it's supposed to be that way. So if you have your compound meter like 6/8 or 9/8 or 12/4, which what have you, it tells you already that the notes are grouped that way. That's the goal of compound meter. Instead of having to, every time you're reading, okay, this is 4/4, it's got 4 beats, but you don't know how the beats are organized. So the triplet is a sometimes thing, and we actually see the opposite, duplets in compound meter actually. Sometimes when they'll be like, okay, there's 3 notes in a beat, but in this case, I need just 2 or I need 4, which is not something we see very often in compound meter. So we could write triplets all the time, but it just gets confusing and it just gets annoying to read because you've got all the 3s all the time on paper. That's basically the difference between compound meter and triplets. It's a sometimes things whether it's a sometimes thing compared to it's an always thing. Okay. So that's the key difference between triplets and compound meter.
That makes sense. Thank you.
A question from our chat from Maggie. Do you liken a meter to a phrase, or does it tend to cover more than one phrase?
It's a very good question. The meter does not completely relate to phrasing. So the meter is an organizational system. It groups the notes rhythmically, and it tells you how the rhythms interact with that foundation that the meter is. But the phrase will usually be quite a few bars. We'll link to the meter, obviously, but the meter is ongoing. It's like a pulse that goes on, and that's just it's just if you take a piece of ruled paper, that's what you write on. And then the phrases are going to be the sentences that you're writing on. So it just serves to organize your phrases and all the sections. And sometimes meter actually changes through a phrase. I mean, the America example that I put in the workshop is a good example. It switches meter every single bar, but the phrases go past that. So the meter is just your underlying organizational scheme, and the phrases relates more to melody.
Okay, we actually have a follow-up question specifically about America. So why don't we jump to that right now? And in the America example, it actually had 2 time signatures at the beginning of the music. How common is that? Why is it printed that way?
So this is a trick that has been used since, I think, roughly beginning of the 20th century, when you've got 2 meters that go back to back all the time. So in America, it's so it's 6/8 and then 3/4, and it always alternates between those two. So instead of changing the time signature at every single bar, which becomes an eyesore really if it just changes through the same pattern, the composer will put the two time signatures back to back at the beginning, and it says it's alternating between one and the next. Sometimes you'll even see 3 or 4 if the grouping is regular, but usually it's just 2 time signatures. You'll see things like 4/4 and 2/4 sometimes, instead of writing 6/4, which makes long bars, and sometimes it's hard to read because they're long. So some composers will do 4/4 and 2/4 and alternate between them, but just write that at the beginning of the music, of the section that isn't that meter. So for America, it's 6/8 and 3/4. It's always alternating between those two. So it's just written once, so you don't have the clutter of a time signature every single bar.
Okay.
And if I can link, actually, it's the same thing. In this case, the alternating meters are the organizational system of that piece. So the underlying part is this alternation between the two. So you say it once, and then it's always there, and then you don't. I don't want to say you don't think about it, but it's always there, so you don't want to print it every single time that it changes.
That's great. Thanks.
Dom, I just want to go back to one of the slides that's in your presentation. You have an example of a 7/8 slide in one of your slides. And is that just like a weird, simple meter, or is it a compound meter?
Usually when you see something like 7/8, it will be, it's actually something we call a complex meter. So in the workshop, I covered simple and compound, which is regular. Complex meter is when you start mixing the two. So you have some beats that are simple and some beats that are compound. So 7/8 usually will be grouped with 2 and 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the third beat will be longer because it includes 3 8 notes. Let's say in 7/8, it's 3 8 notes. So 2 8 notes, 2 8 notes, 3 8 notes. If you play it fast enough, then that's what it will be. It will be a simple compound. 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, and you see 5/8 and 7/8 are probably the most common ones for complex meters, but you can find a bunch of weird examples in all sorts of music. One of my favorite, I think, is from the Dave Brubeck Quartet in Blue Rondo à la Turque. It's 9/8, but it's not compound. It's 4 beats. Instead of 3 beats of 3 8 notes, it's 4 beats, 2 2 2 and 3. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. And every fourth bar is actually a proper compound 9/8. But the 7/8, yeah, it's an example of a complex meter. I didn't really talk about it in the workshop, but I did include it in one of the slides as an example. If it's really slow, it could just be seen as a simple meter, though. Another example would be Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. It's a song that's in 7/4. It's a simple meter. It's just got 7 beats in each bar. I almost included it in the workshop, actually, but for time, I didn't put it in. But if you want to go listen to that one and try to count out loud, the bars are, it's 7 beats before you change bars. It's always the same pattern for the whole song.
So just a little follow-up on the complexity part. I suppose it's complex because if you're thinking about 7/8, you've got 2 2s and a 3, and that 3 really, I suppose, can come anywhere in that measure.
Yes, it can. It could be at the front, it could be in the middle. could be at the end. The overwhelming majority of music written in complex meter will have the compound part at the end. But it could be anywhere, really.
Yeah, and it doesn't always come in the same place. I've seen some Bernstein where it's in 7/8, and you'll have the 3 in the middle beat, and then you'll have the 3 at the end. So that's really where a lot of the complexity comes in.
Yes, yes. Whenever you're starting to play in complex meters, you need to be counting all the time. I mentioned counting a lot in the metronome workshop, but subdividing is key to playing complex meters.
Okay.
And if you just saw when I was explaining the 7/8, I was counting out loud 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. And when you're playing music like that, ideally this is going on in your head, so you're actually counting every 8 note. That way it's much easier to play. And quite often, actually, those complex meters don't appear as a whole piece or a whole section. It's just going to be one bar thrown in every now and then. That's what makes them hard. You need to be subdividing before you get to that bar, otherwise it won't really happen.
That's great. Thanks for explaining that part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go back to sort of another question that Maggie had based on her first question, was about the meter and phrase. So her follow-up question to that was, is a meter more like a measure of the pulse?
So when we're talking about meters, the word meter refers to the structure, and it doesn't refer to any kind of unit of the music. It's just explaining the structure of how the notes are, the rhythms are organized together. So if we're talking about something that's a unit, we could talk about a beat or a measure. And what the meter is telling us is how we organize that bar, how we organize that beat. So if it says 4/4, well, we know it's got 4 beats. So each measure will be 4 beats, and now we know that based on the meter, but that's a repeating, that's now a repeating thing. Every bar will be 4 beats. And it's also telling us that every beat will be simple beats. It's a simple meter, right? So you're going to have 2 8 notes per beat, or 2 subdivisions per beat. And that's an always thing. It's not something that will change unless the meter will change. If the meter changes, then that changes, but it's not telling you anything about a unit of time. So the measure is a unit of time that is described by the meter. And that is something that every measure we can look at and be like, okay, this is exactly 4 beats, but the meter is just how it's organized. I think there was another word in the question that I'm forgetting to address, but
the pulse.
Yes, the pulse. Thank you. So again, the pulse, the meter tells you how many beats. We could see the beat as the pulse. So if you're playing row, row, row your boat, gently, the pulse is just this clapping. Or you could think this is also a pulse. So pulse is something that's also ongoing. So the pulse never stops. I mean, unless you got railroad tracks in your music or a fermata or something like that, obviously the pulse will change or stop. But pulse is ongoing, just like the meter. And the measure and the beat are going to be units that you can calculate with. But the pulse and the meter are sort of ongoing, underlying organizational structures. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think we probably have time for one more question. You said that quadruple, so 4 beats meter, sometimes has the 3rd beat played as a strong beat. Doesn't that, in essence, make it a duple or a 2-beat meter?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, is people don't agree on that. Music theorists don't agree on that, so it's hard to have a definite answer. Definitely, you can rewrite a lot of music that is in 4/4 or 2/4 or quadruple, 2-duple, and vice versa. You could write Frère Jacques in 4/4 or in 2/4. You would just have twice as many bar lines, and no one would really see a big difference. Mostly because people know how to phrase that music without the bar lines. They just know it from when they were kids. becomes hard when your music is harder to phrase intrinsically, which is the case a lot in, I would say, 20th century music. Especially stuff like the New Viennese school. When we're not used to thinking in those terms of melody, and so having the structure be clearer is helpful. But in the case of, we could take, I don't know, Beethoven Symphony Number 5. Ba-da-da-dum, ba-ga-da-dum. It's written 4/4. You could probably rewrite it in 2/4, and musicians would be able to play it, and it would sound pretty much the same.
I suppose it really comes down to an interpretation thing. What's in the mind of the composer or what's in the mind of the conductor when they're putting it together with their group.
Yes, definitely. So as I said in the workshop, usually 4/4 will have sort of a strong beat on beat 3, and that sorts of hints at a duple meter, and that's how people play very often. It's really rare that you have people that play 4/4 with exactly one strong beat on beat 1 and nothing at all on beat 3. You will find, though, sometimes people who play sort of in between the two and sort of do a half strong beat on beat 3. And then that becomes more of a quadruple meter than a duple meter, because you've got one very strong beat on beat 1. If you look at, I mean, I'll take rock music as one example. It will usually say it's quadruple, not because of the phrasing of the meter, but because of the harmonic structure. Usually the chords will last for 1 bar. So they will make the bar last for as long as the chords last. So there's a chord change every bar, even though, there's a chord change every bar. So the 2/4 would have 2 bars to a chord, but the 4/4 just matches the music, the bar lines with the harmonic structure of the piece. So sometimes it's done that way. It's not relating to meter so much as other factors in the music, like harmonic structure or melodic structure.
That's great. Nice explanation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a good question to end on. So we thank you very much for the questions. I think we had great questions, and Dom, wonderful answers.
Thank you.
Please join us at 2 p.m. on Saturday, February 20th on your calendars. Plan to be part of Ogre's next handbell tutorial session. Lisa Kyriakides will be presenting a tutorial on how to recover from a train wreck. I think the title says everything about that topic. And as a player and a conductor, I can kind of associate with that. We hope you encourage your Ogre friends to join us for both this tutorial and the subsequent Q&A.
So on behalf of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, I would like to thank Dom in particular for hosting this Q&A session that went with a fantastic video. And then thank you to everybody who's joined in with both your questions and the session.